Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021 and What You Need to Know, a Canadian podcast by Bluesky Strategy Group. My name is Susan Smith, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Tim Barber, Neil Brody, and Cam Holmstrom. All of us hope that you had a great holiday season and that you're continuing to weather this pandemic well. We have to start today by talking about what happened in DC yesterday, the coup, the insurrection, whatever it is you want to call it. It's a game changer, certainly in terms of domestic U.S. politics, but I'd like to look at it from a Canadian politics angle. Neil, do you think what happened on Capitol Hill yesterday, with thousands of people storming the Capitol building, will have an impact on Canada-U.S. relations when it comes to either right now in the final days of a Trump presidency, or in terms of the Biden-Harris transition and what they do when they first take the reins of power?
Well, first off, it's absolutely terrible that it sounds like 4 people lost their life yesterday attached to that incident. But also the good news is that it was back to business as usual. As I understand, by 10 p.m. votes were occurring again. So that's good news. As far as its effect on Canada, this is mainly I see it as a domestic matter. It may give the Prime Minister Trudeau and the incoming President Biden some common ground to talk about things at their initial meeting. We saw people bust into Parliament Hill and do bad things there, and that's happened in the United States. So it gives them a point of commonality to begin the discussions, but I don't think it's any sort of overriding weight on the relationship between the two countries.
Cam, what do you think? In the dying days of the Prime Minister's statement was pretty careful yesterday in terms of his observations on what was going on. Do you think it'll change how we deal with the Trump administration in its last legs, or the new administration coming in?
Well, I guess I agree with Neil in the sense I believe this is more of a domestic phenomenon, but I think just like anything else, having been our closest neighbor, our biggest trade partner, the old metaphor about when the elephant moves, the mouse can't help but have to react. And I couldn't help but notice yesterday, while everything was happening in Washington, there were stories of Canadians protesting in favor of Trump in Toronto and Calgary, Vancouver, and other places. And just like down there, their politics do influence ours. So I think there is a little bit of that. But I think really what it comes down to is what happens next. If yesterday turned into one awful day and one awful incident, and they're able to come together and move forward, I don't think it'll affect our relationship at all. If it continues to deteriorate and gets worse, I think that's when we have to start to be a little more concerned. Honestly, no one in our generation, really going back to the 1860s, have we ever seen anything like that where we have to worry about such instability on our border. And I personally don't think it's going to get that far. Even despite what happened yesterday, I still believe that won't happen. But I guess yesterday was a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of people that things really have gone much further down the road than we've ever seen before with them.
Tim, in the context of the Canada-U.S. energy file, when it comes to a transition perspective, we still obviously face tariff threats continuously from Donald Trump, especially when he's angry, and we know he's angry right now. But I'm thinking about as well the KXL file. Do you think there's any implications with the Biden-Harris agenda? Could there be any reverb on where files that are of matter of importance to Canadians, i.e. KXL or others?
Well, I think what was missed in the news yesterday because of what went on Capitol Hill was the election in Georgia of 2 Democratic senators, which means all of the committees are now controlled by Democrats, which is a game changer. I think that a lot more of the Biden administration's climate agenda will get pushed through, not through presidential executive orders, but actually through legislation. So I think that's a game changer. On the big wake up call that you started off though with, I think that the wake up call for us should be the use of social media. And it was announced earlier today that President Trump is not going to be allowed on Facebook for the next 2 weeks, and he's, I think, still banned from Twitter. So I think that the reverb that I'm feeling or thinking about is our political parties and their use of social media, and that these tools can be used really irresponsibly. So, not to digress off the energy question, but I mean that's I think the big lesson is that how do you use those Twitter and Facebook as a political tool, and I think a lot of these groups that used to be kind of off in the dark corners can find each other in the dark web now in a way that they couldn't 10, 15 years ago. So that to me is quite worrisome in terms of democracy and our party politics.
Well, and to Cam's point, there is sometimes a spillover effect in the U.S. From U.S. politics to Canadian, or U.S. society to Canadian social behavior as well. I hope this is one seepage that gets stopped at the border with COVID. But to your point, social media can aggravate that, definitely. Speaking of COVID, this continues to be the story that much as we wish it would go away because we want COVID to go away, it hasn't gone away. Quebec's going into a greater curfew. Ontario is still contemplating a greater lockdown. The numbers in Alberta continue not to be good. We're still in trouble with this disease or this virus. When it comes to looking ahead, from our perspective, from a government relations perspective, how much looking ahead can we do? How much planning can we do? How much planning can businesses do? What's going to be on the government agenda for the coming months and maybe year as we look forward? Neil, I'll start with you.
Vaccines. I mean, the solution we've been told to get out of this up and down, lockdown, not lockdown cycle is to get a critical mass of Canadians vaccinated. The Trudeau government, they've come out with a very good, what sounds like a very good plan to procure vaccinations. There's some logistics, it sounds like, that need to be overcome, hurdles that need to be overcome on the rollout of the vaccinations. But all governments, federal or provincial, will be graded on how well the vaccination process occurs over the next 3, 6, 9 months, whatever the timelines happen to be. And until whatever that critical mass is, I know I've heard different numbers. Until that critical mass of Canadians is vaccinated, we will see ourselves go through the peak and valley of lockdown, not lockdown.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Cam, in terms of government focus, do you see any pivot off COVID in the coming, by the end of this year, or do you see it dominating the bulk of the year?
I see it dominating the bulk of the year. I think we'll really know what the odds are of that by the end of the summer. And I think I agree with Neil. It comes down to the pace of vaccinations and where we're able to get to. Well, I saw a good news story today, and from my home region, back home in Northwestern Ontario, some of the more remote communities are starting to get vaccinations. And to see that happening in an area where the supply chain is a real particularly big problem. They did the cold storage is just not there. So to see that now those areas are starting to get vaccinated, those are the biggest logistical challenges for us. So see that starting to happen gives hope that it'll happen. I say we'll know by the end of the summer, because what I've been finding throughout this is that when we start to get some good solutions to certain issues, like for example the vaccine, other issues pop up, like for example the new variants that came out of the UK and South Africa, and it seems that it seems that there is no final question yet that we have to answer before we can say we're out. And I suspect that by the end of the summer, if we're able to really get people vaccinated, we're seeing that it's taking hold, we're seeing that it's dealing with these other variants that pop up, I think we'll be in a position to then start to really look towards what's next after this. I think that's going to be the key. And I give governments credit here. They've been flexible. They have been, working through very difficult circumstances, and they've been doing it with not always having the answers in hand. So my hope is that by that point we'll be able to make that shift out. But by then we'll know.
Tim, we're at Bluesky Strategy Group in the government relations and strategic communications business. That's what we do. We provide advice to our clients on people looking to deal with the federal government or have issues that deal with the government. What do you think the COVID lens continues to mean for people from a government relations perspective? What kind of advice have you been giving clients?
Well, I think that right now government is overwhelmed with dealing with, again, short-term liquidity for people and businesses. I think that's been its focus since March. and it may have come out of that a bit over the summer, but I think it's back into that heavily. I think they're also focused on vaccine. So government being overwhelmed and a lack of bandwidth means there's opportunity for people to present. First of all, government can't know the impact it's having on every sector, so you have to be able to tell your story. And number two, I think government right now is a taker of ideas and looking for creative ideas on dealing with complex problems. On the vaccine issue, I would say, I'll use the example of Quebec. 92% of deaths is in people over the age of 75. 7% of the Quebec population is over 75. I just don't understand why we have so failed on figuring this out. And of course there's going to be the anecdotal evidence of the 49-year-old that catches COVID and dies. But I really think governments need to be focused on vaccine and making sure that the Prime Minister said the other day by September, if that can be expedited. I hope he's under promising and going to over deliver, because that's a long way away.
Yeah, Neil, I'm just going to jump in and then I'll come to you on this. I'd agree with you there, Tim. The one thing I think the COVID lens will continue to color everything the federal government is doing, and I think, quite frankly, the provincial governments are doing. There is money that will flow, but I think decision makers continue to be virtually all consumed by COVID, whether it's dealing with it from a vaccine perspective or the economic recovery out of the pandemic and trying to reboot our economy. The government's put a green lens on it. No, they're not there yet, but it's something for people, I think, to bear in mind when they're looking at presenting things to government. Neil, you wanted to jump in.
What it means for government relations, to add on to Tim's points, a lot more video calls. If we ever thought we were going to get rid of video calls, I think video calls are with us for the next 2 years, at least more. Lobby days have to be rethought. We've talked to some clients who do regular what we call lobby days or hill days, where you invite MPs and ministers to your event to get your message out. And we're working on new ways to engage MPs virtually, and we'll continue to learn about this through the next year. We all, I think, perhaps thought short-sightedly that we might be out of this by the end of 2020. We start 2021 thinking, is this going to be over by June, July, August, September? Hopefully, as Tim alluded to, hopefully earlier. Hopefully there's a under promise, over deliver coming. But at least for the next session of Parliament till summer, a lot more virtual engagement is the way to go.
Well, let's talk about the next session of Parliament till summer. In particular, do we think it will go all the way till summer? Cam, what's your view from the opposition benches? Do you think the opposition will trigger an election this spring or this fall? Is this what we're also thinking about heading to?
To be honest, I believe there's going to be an election in 2021. I'm less convinced it's going to be in the spring, mostly just because of the state of COVID. I think the logistics of trying to run a COVID national general election are just too much to overcome. We've seen different provinces that did it, but that involved much more condensed travel spaces where there was travel, and you could really customize things more to that. When you think of logistics of as a regular national campaign, the campaign airplane, the ad buys, the door knocking, all of that, I don't think that's going to be a possibility come to spring. And I honestly believe that, especially after what we saw over the past week and a half with stories of MPs taking vacations and just how people generally felt, the message that's sent to people, I think having a general election when there didn't need to be one, I think that's going to be something that will elicit a similar response. But I do believe it'll come in the fall, because let's face it, most minority parliaments last 18 to 24 months. The fall will make 24 months. So we're in that normal window. And I think the opposition parties have done a good job of holding their powder so far. And I think most are going to be, if they had to go this spring, they'll be ready. If they go in the fall, they'll be that much more ready. And I think they'd rather be that much more ready.
So Neil, in a nutshell, Aaron O'Toole's numbers actually haven't been rising. They've been sinking. Do you think the Conservatives want an election in the short, medium, or longer term?
The only I can't see any of the opposition parties wanting an election. Nobody's you trigger an election as an opposition party when you feel like you have something to gain. I don't think any of the opposition parties have anything to gain by triggering an election. So it'll be up to Mr. Trudeau to decide to pull the plug in whatever way he manages to do that, to go to the polls. I don't think, if he's going to go, I think he should go earlier this year. He's going to get an ethics report soon on the We Charity scandal. He's going to, once people get tired of hanging the fault of all of this slow vaccination process on the premiers, if the vaccine, the incoming vaccine purchases don't actually start building up quickly, he's going to wear that too. If he's going to go, I would recommend he goes. And the bills, the money expended on the pandemic response will start coming to light as you go through the year. So if he's going to go, Mr. Trudeau's going to go, he should go in the next couple of weeks or before the budget, maybe. But if he's not going to go then, much like Cam, it's the fall or into the next calendar year before there's an election.
Tim, I'm getting the signal from our producer, Alison Fair, that we need to wrap up.
I'll
but
really
I'm going to, that's exactly, yes, no, and when.
I'll be really short. Massive budget with tons of spending and aspirational related promises in March. April, I can't, a walk across the courtyard to see the Governor General dissolve the House, May election.
Okay.
And with the
All
one
right.
caveat that's assuming that it's not a total fiasco in terms of vaccinating and immunization.
All right. Well, we'll hold you to that prediction. Everybody's got their quarters on the table for that. Thanks, gentlemen. Always a pleasure speaking with you. It's a great way to kick off the year. Hopefully our American friends settle things down, and hopefully we get a handle on this vaccine distribution and we get a lot of jabs in arms going forward. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in to What You Need to Know, a Canadian podcast with Bluesky Strategy Group's team of political observers. Until next time, stay happy and please stay safe. Bluesky Strategy Group is one of Canada's leading public affairs firms. For government relations, lobbying, and strategic communications advice across Canada, visit us at blueskystrategygroup.com.